Picture a container ship in the middle of the Pacific, 900 feet of steel, stacked with more than 10,000 boxes, and somewhere inside all of that cargo, 22 people who haven't touched dry land in 6 weeks. The nearest port is 4 days away. There are no stores out here, no restaurants, no delivery, nothing but water in every direction for 1,000 miles, and yet, 3 times a day, every single one of those 22 people sits down to a hot meal. Where does that food come from? How does a floating city feed itself for 9 months when the closest grocery store is sometimes an entire ocean away? Here's the thing most people never consider. These crews aren't just surviving out there. Many of them eat better at sea than they did at home. And the reason why involves a system so precise, so carefully engineered, that one small mistake can turn a routine voyage into a genuine crisis. There are 3 layers to this story. The first is where they actually eat. The second is who keeps them fed. And the third is what happens when the food runs out, because it can and it has. By the end of this video, you'll never look at the shirt on your back or the phone in your hand the same way again, because almost everything you own crossed an ocean on a ship crewed by people living like this. So let's start with the obvious question. On a ship that size, where do 22 people eat? You might imagine some giant cafeteria. It's not. Tucked deep inside the ship's accommodation block, usually just below the bridge, sits a room smaller than most fast food restaurants. This is the mess room. And on most cargo ships, there are actually 2 of them right next to each other. One is the officer's mess. The other is the crew mess. It's a tradition that goes back more than a century. A quiet line drawn between the people who run the ship and the people who work the deck and the engine room. Same food, same kitchen, different room. The captain, the chief engineer, and the senior officers eat on one side. The able seamen, the oilers, the wipers eat on the other. Between those 2 rooms sits the heart of the entire vessel, a steel kitchen bolted down against the roll of the sea called the galley. Everything is fixed in place. The pots have guardrails. The stove has bars across it so nothing slides off when the ship pitches in a storm. And in the middle of all that stands one person who might be the single most important human being on board. Not the captain, the cook. On a ship of 22 people, there is usually exactly one cook. Sometimes he has a single helper, a messman, who sets the tables and washes the dishes. That's it. One man, sometimes 2, feeding an entire crew breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day for months without a break. No days off, no weekends. The ocean doesn't take holidays, and neither does hunger. Ask any experienced seafarer who really controls the mood on a ship, and they won't say the captain. They'll say the cook, because out here, food isn't just fuel. When you're 6 weeks from home, working 12-hour shifts, staring at the same 40 faces you've stared at for 2 months straight, that plate of hot food at the end of your watch is the one thing you have left to look forward to. A good cook keeps a crew sane. A bad cook can turn a 9-month contract into a slow-motion mutiny. But here's the part almost nobody thinks about. Where does all that food actually come from? Because a cook can't order more. There's no restocking in the middle of the ocean, and that leads to a problem that has to be solved before the ship ever leaves the dock. Every voyage begins with something called provisioning. Before the ship sails, a truck pulls up alongside in port, and the crew loads food. Not for a few days, for the entire leg of the journey, plus a mandatory safety reserve on top of that, in case of delays, storms, or a breakdown that leaves them stranded at sea longer than planned. We're talking about tons of food, literally tons. Sacks of rice stacked to the ceiling, cases of canned meat and vegetables, frozen chicken, beef, and fish by the pallet. And it all has to fit into a very specific set of rooms deep inside the ship. There are 3 of them, and the order matters. The first is the dry store for rice, pasta, flour, canned goods, anything that keeps at room temperature. The second is the cold room, kept just above freezing, for fresh fruit, vegetables, eggs, and dairy. And the third is the freezer, held well below 0, packed with meat and fish meant to last the entire voyage. And this is where the real challenge begins, because those 3 rooms empty at completely different speeds. The fresh food goes first. Within the first 2 weeks, the fruit and vegetables are gone. There's no way around it. A tomato doesn't survive a month at sea, no matter how cold you keep it. So the smartest cooks plan around it. Fresh salads and fruit in week 1. By week 3, they've shifted to frozen and preserved everything. Cabbage and onions last longer than lettuce, so they show up later. Potatoes hang on for weeks, and by the final stretch of a long voyage, a huge amount of what lands on the plate is coming out of cans and out of the freezer. Now here's a number that surprises almost everyone. That cook isn't working with an unlimited budget. He's given a fixed amount of money to feed each person each day. On many ships, that figure sits somewhere around $10 to $13 per person, per day. That's it, roughly $12 a day to serve one human being 3 full meals in the middle of the ocean with no chance to run to the store when he runs short. Think about that. $13 a day times 22 people times 270 days at sea. The cook has to stretch every single dollar, waste almost nothing, and still keep morale high. It's not just cooking, it's mathematics under pressure, and the pressure never stops. And it gets harder because a modern crew is rarely from just one country. The captain might be Croatian, the engineers might be Indian, and a huge share of the world's seafarers, by some counts around a quarter of the entire global merchant fleet, come from a single nation, the Philippines. That one cook might be feeding 4 or 5 different nationalities at the same table, each with completely different tastes. Rice at nearly every meal for some, spice for others, beef that certain crew members won't touch for religious reasons. He has to satisfy all of them out of the same small galley from the same shrinking stores. So what happens when it goes wrong? Because it does go wrong. Picture a ship delayed by a massive storm, forced to slow down for days, burning through its food reserves while the next port keeps getting further away. Or a refrigeration unit that fails in the tropics and suddenly hundreds of pounds of frozen meat start to thaw with 2,000 miles of open water still ahead. This is exactly why the reserve exists. Maritime rules require ships to carry extra provisions beyond what the voyage should need, specifically for these moments. But reserves aren't infinite, and there are documented cases, real ones, of crews stranded for months when a shipping company went bankrupt and abandoned the vessel, leaving the people on board running dangerously low on food and fresh water, waiting on charities and port authorities to bring them supplies. That's the part that stays with you. On a ship, the food supply isn't a convenience. It's a lifeline. Run out, and there is no backup plan a few blocks away. There's only the ocean. Now here's what nobody expects. Ask a seafarer near the end of a 9-month contract what he misses most about land, and a lot of them won't say their bed or the city or even the fresh air. They'll say a specific meal, something their mother used to cook, a dish from home they haven't tasted in months, because out there, food becomes memory. That tiny mess room with its bolted down tables and its 2 or 3 familiar dishes on rotation becomes the closest thing to home that 22 strangers have. They celebrate birthdays in it. They mark holidays in it. When someone gets news from family a world away, good or bad, this is the room where the crew gathers around them. So the next time a package lands on your doorstep, remember the journey it took. Remember that almost everything in your home once sat in a steel box on a ship crewed by people who spent 9 months away from everyone they love. And every single day out there, in a cramped little room the size of a diner, they sat down together and ate. Now I want to hear from you. If you've worked at sea, what meal did you miss the most out there? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if this gave you a new way of looking at the stuff in your house, hit like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.